You're watching YouTube, the cable access of the 21st century. It's Wednesday, it's 4 p.m. where I am, and it's time to talk about movies and answer your questions. Welcome to Dan's World. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Dan's World. Believe it or not, it's been about 2 months since we had one of these episodes. That was not my intention. I anticipated taking a holiday break, then coming back for a bit before I went to Sundance, but sometimes life throws you some curveballs. So this is the first show that we've done live in quite some time. I have lots of stories that happened, that are happening now, that happened while we were gone, that I want to talk about. But I am also, as always, taking your questions. So if you want to leave a super chat down there in the comments below, then I will definitely get to it. I also try to scroll when I can the comments that are coming in regardless, but it's like mission control back here. I'm doing the elements. It's just me. I'm a one-man band as always. But we've got a lot of stuff. I should always ask, first of all, can you see me? Can you hear me? I forgot my number one question. Looks like no complaints so far. It's always a 50-50 shot here on this stream as far as whether you're going to be able to see me or hear me, but it looks like you are, which is great. But we are going to talk about the new Disney CEO. We're going to talk about Alamo Drafthouse and a new change in policy. We're going to be talking about the Academy Awards and a controversial decision they've made for their telecast. We're going to be talking about one of the craziest fan theories that I've ever heard of, which happened about a month ago around Stranger Things, and a whole lot more, plus your questions. But before we do any of that, I talked about the fact that being in Park City, being at Sundance, you're in a little bit of a bubble. This is news that didn't reach me, I think, until a while after it happened, maybe late in that day or the next day. And it's something that I haven't had a chance to talk about here on the channel yet because I was doing Sundance, and then Charts this week was just packed with stuff. But I wanted to talk a little bit about Katherine O'Hara, who passed away last week. One of the funniest people on this planet, for my money at least. Katherine O'Hara had a decades-long career on television and in Hollywood. She started in the Second City Improv Troupe, evolved into SCTV, which was one of the greatest comedy shows of all time. This was the cast of season 1 of SCTV. Katherine O'Hara, John Candy, Joe Flaherty, who we lost not that long ago, Eugene Levy, Andrea Martin, Harold Ramis, Dave Thomas. That's season 1. I mean, put that up against any Saturday Night Live cast, and that's going to be a competition. Katherine O'Hara would move on to that. She was in so many movies from the 80s onwards. Beetlejuice always makes me laugh in Beetlejuice. The funniest part of the movie is when she's doing the Deo song at the dinner table. Of course, for many people, she was known through her resurgence and her feature appearances in so many Christopher Guest films. And again, I think that in a cast always packed with comedians, Katherine O'Hara was always vying to be the funniest person in every Christopher Guest movie that she was ever in. For my generation, I certainly first became aware of Katherine O'Hara in Home Alone as Kevin's mom. Not probably her most prominent role, not maybe her most comedic role, but I would dare to say that Katherine O'Hara was on as many television screens this Christmas than anybody else. Chevy Chase, you name it. Any of the people in the Christmas movie sphere, Home Alone has become kind of the classic for that generation. And that was certainly where I first saw her. And then she was just in the studio. She had a great supporting role in the studio. She had an acclaimed turn in Schitt's Creek. And this was one of those that was just a complete surprise. It wasn't one of those things where you heard that Katherine O'Hara wasn't doing well and you were preparing yourself. This was kind of a bolt out of the blue, and you realize how much you take for granted someone like her, who, when she was in a movie or when she was in a TV show, even if the movie or show wasn't good, if I saw that Katherine O'Hara was in it, I'd be like, okay, well, at least she's going to be great in it. And she always was. She never disappointed. One of the funniest, one of the most consistent performers around. And it was so sad for me to see that she had passed away. So yeah, Katherine O'Hara, rest in peace. Absolute legend, Hollywood legend, comedy legend. Give her flowers. If you are not familiar with Katherine O'Hara, just go back and start watching her movies. You are in for such a treat because she was one of the funniest people alive. And so, yeah, rest in peace. As always, my condolences to her friends, to her family, and to her fans. So let's talk about the other big news, the big industry news, aside from the ever present continuing possible merger between Netflix, Warner Brothers, and or Paramount. That would be a whole show on its own. What a just garbage fire that has turned out to be. But down the street at Disney, they've got a new CEO coming in effective in March. Disney this past week named Josh D'Amaro the new CEO, replacing Bob Iger. Bob Iger was contracted through the end of this year. Josh D'Amaro is actually going to be coming in on March 18th, so they're changing that role over a little bit early. He's currently head of the Parks Division, or I think as Disney calls it, the Experiences Division, which is the same role that Bob Chapek held before he became CEO. Of course, Bob Chapek's tenure was short-lived and not very successful. Reportedly, the difference between these two is that Josh D'Amaro has much better personal relationships within Disney, within the company. He's been working for Disney since 1998. This has sort of been the big question of who is going to succeed Bob Iger. There was obviously not a great process in place last time. We'll see if it works out better this time. It was considered to be kind of a two-person race between D'Amaro and Dana Walden, who has been the CEO in waiting, it seems like, for years now. She was elevated to, I think, Chief Creative Officer. So they gave her a promotion as well. I'm sure that was an attempt to keep her in the company after passing her over yet again for the CEO role. I think that the CEO of Disney has kind of achieved godlike status, and not necessarily. I don't think you should necessarily say the future of the company is all down to this one person. When Michael Eisner was there, I think he cultivated that, and he certainly was a very influential CEO. And then Bob Iger, I think because Bob Iger was there for so much, and not to say that he had nothing to do with it, he had a lot to do with it. But because they were so successful during Bob Iger's term, and then things took such a disastrous downturn with Bob Chapek there, even though, and I've said this on the show before, Bob Chapek was executing a lot of the plans that Bob Iger had put in place. But I think that Iger kind of got this savior status because he came back in. Disney hasn't exactly been at its most successful since Iger came back. So this is noteworthy because Disney is a massive company, not just in the movie business, but also in, the parks division and just about everything, it seems like. But this to me is not a case of well, okay, if this guy blows it, then the whole company is going down the tubes. I think that people look at the Disney CEO because it's such a big company, and it is an important role. Don't get me wrong. But at the end of the day, he's a manager. I mean, he's there to make certain calls and everything else. But so much of the success of the company is now on the shoulders of Kevin Feige, if you're talking about Marvel, and then the new leadership at Lucasfilm, which is a whole other story that happened while we were gone with Kathleen Kennedy stepping down. Of course, the people saying that she was going to step down for 6 or 7 years now, a lot of them are doing victory laps because they're saying, "See, I told you." Yeah, you've been saying that for like 5 or 6 years. Eventually, that's going to happen. Briefly, as far as the new leadership at Disney, at Lucasfilm, I'm gonna give it a chance to work. Dave Filoni, I'm not the happiest about that pick because I think that he tends to navel gaze a lot when it comes to Star Wars and want to go backwards, especially into stuff that he's worked on and flesh out every individual stormtrooper. And I don't necessarily think that that's the best direction for Star Wars, but I'm not going to sit here and be a doom and gloom guy because we don't know yet what's going to happen. And he's not the only person in charge over there now. But yeah, when they were talking about the different people that could take over Lucasfilm, Dave Filoni was not one of the ones that got me the most excited, but he is now working under Josh D'Amaro, and it could be a new era. They certainly do need to do some things differently. I mean, Marvel very much in a rebuilding phase. We'll see, if Avengers Doomsday doesn't work, I don't know where Marvel goes from there because they're pulling out all the big guns. Everybody, it seems like, is coming back. I hope that they're not officially undoing a lot of what they did because I thought that Avengers Endgame was a great end to that particular saga, but we'll see what happens there. But Marvel's in a rebuilding phase. Star Wars, it seems like, has been in one for 6 or 7 years. We'll see what happens with The Mandalorian and Grogu. So this is probably a good time to change CEOs because so much of what's happening at Disney is transitional, and Josh D'Amaro's job is obviously going to be very important when it comes to helping to guide that change. But to me, it's not this thing of like it's all on his shoulders. I think that Bob Iger got a lot of credit for stuff that he was certainly involved in, but not necessarily responsible for. And we'll see if that goes on to the next CEO, or if maybe he takes an undue amount of blame. Like I think that listen, Bob Chapek was not good at his. I mean, I didn't work with him, so I can't say he wasn't good at his job from experience, but he was not an effective CEO. I think he shouldered some of that blame unfairly and a lot of it very fairly. And we'll see how much grace gets extended to this new CEO or if he's under pressure from day one. But it's always big news when Disney changes CEOs because they have so much riding on everything, it seems like right now. So that is a big story. We're going to get to your questions in just a second because I see that some have come in, but I want to do one more story before we do that, and it involves this year's Academy Awards. It seems like every year there's a controversial decision that is made ahead of the telecast. And this year, there's always the question of, are they going to put the nominated songs on the telecast or are they not going to put the nominated songs on the telecast? Well, this year they decided yes and no. Because in a letter that was sent out to all of the nominees for Best Original Song, the producers told them that 2 songs are going to be featured on the Oscar telecast this year, one from Sinners and one from K-pop Demon Hunters. In the letter, they said, quote, given the limited time within the broadcast, the addition of our casting Oscar, and a desire to create a fast-paced, entertaining, and cohesive show, the live performance focus will be concentrated on 2 musical moments this year. Like they say, musical moments, not songs, Sinners and K-pop Demon Hunters, with segments designed to honor how music helped these stories resonate worldwide. The other songs will be featured via custom video introductions, but they won't be performed on the Oscar stage. And there have been some very angry people, first and foremost among them, Diane Warren, who, as prophecy foretells every year, is once again nominated for the Academy Award, lest the earth be swallowed up by the giant space worm that only she can keep at bay. Diane Warren spoke out to Deadline, saying that she did not think that this was fair to the other nominees. She said, quote, put all the songs on. It's all of us or none of us. And that's what it should be. We all are legitimately nominated, and to make a choice like that and throw the other songs under the bus is wrong. I'm speaking for me, of course, but I feel like I'm also speaking for the other nominees. It is wrong. If you don't take all the songs off, it's just unfair to all the others. What matters is that we are all nominated. And let me get one thing straight here. Diane Warren, I think, is right. You can't pick and choose and say, even though these are the 2 frontrunners for Best Original Song, as an Oscars telecast, you can't pick and choose and say, okay, well, we're featuring these because, everybody knows. And these other ones, don't worry, you'll get your moment. I agree. It's got to be all or none. I have been beating the drum for a long time that I hate that the Oscars, whenever they want to make a change, whether that's taking categories off the air, whether that's only putting 2 songs into the show, the Oscar producers always use the excuse of, well, the show's just too long. And then you watch the show every year and you can find 25 minutes of junk that could be cut out to make room for all of the stuff that the producers said they didn't have time for. I mean, if you just had an orchestra director that would physically yank Adrian Brody off stage last year, you could have found 5 minutes in the show right there. But we didn't get that. So I think that it's a BS excuse every year when the producers hide behind the show is too long excuse, because they never make use of the time that they seem to be finding in the Academy Awards show. But I think that it's interesting. Like I said, Diane Warren is right in this case. But it's ironic that the universe has brought us to a place where Diane Warren is the one who has to be speaking out publicly about Academy favoritism, when I think probably nobody else in the history of the Academy Awards has benefited from Academy favoritism more than Diane Warren. I mean, she could write a musical representation of a fart she had last week on a paper napkin and get nominated for Best Original Song. Like I said, it doesn't make her wrong. She's right. But it's just one of those crazy things that the universe has conspired for Diane Warren to be the voice against favoritism at the Academy Awards when it comes to Best Original Song. But yeah, I if anything, if you're going to put songs on and you don't want to put all of the Best Original Song nominees on, then you have to just stay away from Best Original Song. You have to do things like they did last year with Wicked, where you're using music from movies that isn't nominated, but you still want a musical performance. They botched that with We Don't Talk About Bruno, which they didn't nominate. But if you want to include songs in the Academy Awards, you can't pick and choose among the nominees. You have to include them all in some capacity in a performance way, or you include none of them and use other music. But Diane Warren is correct. It's not fair to the other nominees. I don't know if they're going to back down. I don't know how they can back down at this point, because they've already said that this is what they're going to do. And Golden, this is the harsh reality of it, though. Golden is the song that's going to get people to tune in. You couldn't not have an Oscar ceremony where Golden is not performed. That's not an option. But it seems like the Academy took the wrong middle road option of saying, okay, well, we have to include Golden, but instead of saying we include all the other ones, they say, well, let's just include the other one from Sinners and none of the others. You have to know that that's not going to sit well. You do. You have to know that that's not going to sit well. And again, you can find the time, Academy producers. There's every year there is time. Every year. And I love that they're hiding behind the fact, like, well, we added a new category this year. We don't have time. Look at all these categories we have. Like, you were yanking them off the air left and right. You're in the previous years. And now you're saying, like, well, we have to make room for this new category. Well, that wasn't a big priority to you the other years. Yeah. So, yes, this is just another example. It seems like every year the Academy producers make a decision ahead of the show that's not the right decision. And yeah. Oh, I see. We have, sorry, I'm looking at my comments. Couldn't not. That's a double negative. Yes. Okay. It probably was. Maybe it was intentional. I don't even remember what I said. I don't have time for grammar police. I'm sorry. The grammar police are out in full force today. It'll be okay. I promise. Okay. Let's get to some of your questions. I have other stories that I want to talk about, but I already have some questions that came in and I want to make sure that they're part of the show today. Let's start off with one. And luckily I had some time to think about this one. This comes from Hawker Walks 5219, who said, hey, Dan, if you could have Siskel and Ebert come back to review a recent film, which one would you choose? And I saw this before I went on the air. I had a chance to think about it for a minute. And I wanted to go after Ebert died because, Siskel unfortunately passed away before Ebert. But I wanted one that neither of them had a chance to talk about. And this is probably not a surprise, but I would want them both to come back and talk about any of the Minions movies. I know that there have been a lot of great movies in the last 10 years, and I loved watching Siskel and Ebert talk about a great movie that they loved. I mean, that was a huge influence on me. But I mean, if you're saying that both of them can come back for one movie, there was nothing better, especially if you didn't like the movie as well. There was nothing better than watching Siskel and Ebert just eviscerate a movie that you hated. And so I would love to see them come back and review a Minions film because I can't imagine that they would enjoy it. I think they'd be like me. I think they would both get more annoyed the more that came out. And so I would want to see them. I want that Schadenfreude of hearing them tear apart a Minions movie and going, yes, exactly. That's what I've been thinking. Or maybe they love them and it gives me a challenging thing to do as a critic to figure out how in the world they got to a point where they both enjoyed a Minions movie. But yeah, that would be my that'd be my pick because I loved to watch them tear stuff apart, even if they were so eloquent when they loved something. And if you said like two movies, I'd say, okay, a Minions movie and Oppenheimer. But if you're only giving me one, then that's the one I'd pick. Bat Shark Repellent, ooh, what a great name, says, hi, Dan, despite some of the best films ever, European nations haven't done box office numbers historically like Japan and Korea. Why do you think that is? Thanks. Well, I think partially when we talk about Japan and box office hits, and I can't think of any exceptions to this, it's anime. It's Demon Slayer. It's the animation coming out of Japan that's done these numbers. I think that live action Japanese cinema has not broken through more so than European cinema, as you're mentioning here. And Korean cinema, again, is we're talking Parasite, which was a big box office hit, but there are very few films from South Korea that have broken through to the level of something like a Demon Slayer, something that you could say like, oh, it did well for an international film. But you could say like, wow, that was a huge box office hit. So I think that really what it is that there is a certain, novelty sounds like I'm diminishing it, but it's a new form of cinema that a lot of people here in the United States and even a lot of people in Europe haven't seen before, especially with mainstream anime. And things like Demon Slayer that are hitting so big. And even Parasite was so distinctly in the style of Bong Joon-ho that nobody had really seen many movies like that before. Whereas I think a lot of European films, they resemble other European films. They resemble Hollywood films in form, style, structure. Not all of them, but some of them. And then when you break that structure, you risk, oh, it's too weird. And I think that we here in the United States, viewers, are maybe a little bit more permissive of out of the box filmmaking from filmmakers and countries that we're less familiar with than we are with countries in Europe or here in the US. So I think that there is a certain freshness and a newness to a lot of these breakout hits from Japan and South Korea that we don't necessarily get from a lot of films in Hollywood and from a lot of the European countries. But that stuff is also there, by the way, in the other countries. I think that it's easier to spot, or it's easier for people here to connect to because they've never seen that specific kind of filmmaking before. And so I think it's the newness of it. That's my opinion anyway. Potty 01, hi Alan, says, hi Dan, glad you had so much fun at Sundance. Your first experience of a film festival. Yes, it was. Is there anything that you learned this time around that you would do differently next time? Yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk a little bit about Sundance later in the show. I think that, I mean, one of the things that made me sad, and I mentioned this in my last video, I think from Park City, is that there was so much I learned this year that is specific to Park City as far as where things are, the best way to get around, how long it takes to get from one place to another. There are times where I had a hole in my schedule because I had planned, I didn't know how long it'd take for me to get from, let's say, the library to the Holiday Village, and how long the lines were and how early I needed to be there. And there were times where I probably could have snuck in another movie here or there that if I were going back to Park City, I would know that next time. But that doesn't make a difference because it's not going to be in Park City next year. So a lot of the stuff that I learned is kind of off the table. I'm going to have to learn everything all over again in Boulder, as is everybody else, because it's going to be the first year for Sundance to be there. I think that I learned some things during the festival that I think I will take away with me. I watched 38 movies in 11 days, and I could have done more. And my objective going in the first few days was, hey, I'm going to, every single day, the only thing I care about is I'm going to watch as many movies as I can, and that's it. I'm not going to do anything else. And I actually changed course 2 or 3 days in because I realized that if I did that, sorry, I hit the mic there. If I did that, I would be missing the experience of being there. I wouldn't know what Park City itself is like. I wouldn't know what it's like to be necessarily experiencing the festival. I would have seen a bunch of movies and I would know what the inside of a theater is like. But after a few days, I thought, no, I also want to walk away from this with just a memory of like living in this environment and being here. And so there were some times where I took my foot off the gas, and I took some time to meet up with people that messaged me, on Instagram, who said, hey, I'm here. I met some folks from the Patreon. We had dinner, which was great. I ran into Brett Weiner. If you don't know Brett Weiner, Brett is the guy who reached out to me originally and said, hey, do you want to come edit this thing that we're working on at my company called the Screen Junkie Show? Do you want to come in and edit that? Because he knew me from my work at Channel 101. I ran into Brett and took the time to go out and talk to him. I met up with my buddy Scott Mance while I was there, took the time to have lunch with him. And there were some days, like the last day that I was there on Sunday, the last full day that I was there, I took the afternoon. Instead of watching a movie, I went back up to Main Street and I walked up Main Street again, and I popped into a couple of the stores, and I stopped and, had a beer in the pub where the first place that I went to when I got there. And so that to me is a lesson that I learned on the fly that I'm going to take away. Of course, my goal will always still be to maximize how many movies I watch, because that's really why I'm there, is to watch these new and exciting films. But I think that a lesson that I'll know from the beginning next time is to make sure that I take time to enjoy the experience and not just cram as many movies as I can, because I'd walk away saying, yeah, but what was it actually like? I'm glad that I was able to realize that before the end of the festival. Potter Potty 01 also says, was there any sort of tribute to Robert Redford while you were there? Did you feel his presence or was it largely ignored? No, it was very much present. First of all, a lot of people had buttons, were wearing buttons that said, "Thank you, Bob," on them. Robert Redford, Bob Redford. His presence was felt very much throughout the festival. They had a showing of Downhill Racer, which his daughter, Amy Redford, said they selected specifically because he would always speak about how difficult it was to get that made. And she thought that was very much in the spirit of Sundance. And then before every single movie, there was a video featuring Robert Redford talking about the Sundance Institute and the power of independent cinema and why it's so important. That would run before they even introduced the film, and it got applause every time. So no, Robert Redford was very felt. He was very much, there was always a tribute to him, and his presence was very much felt, especially I think compounded with the fact that it was the last week or last year in Park City. Freakstop 95 says, can we get a review for Iron Lung this week? Thank you. Yes, you can actually, probably tomorrow. I saw it last night and was trying to get it done for today, but I'm still kind of recovering from Sundance because it was exhausting. So yes, stay tuned. Most likely tomorrow you will have a review for Iron Lung. I'm catching up on a lot of stuff that I didn't get to while I was in Park City. Dylan Fitzsimmons 2278 says, favorite NFL team and who are you rooting for on Sunday? You know, I don't really have a favorite NFL team specifically. I didn't grow up with the NFL. I grew up with college football, baseball. Arkansas is not really that close to any NFL teams. I guess people here, the Cowboys are kind of big in central Arkansas where I grew up. I've noticed up here in Northwest Arkansas, there are a lot of Chiefs fans, but I've never really been loyal to one NFL team. So I don't have a favorite team. Who am I rooting for on Sunday? I don't really have a horse in the race. For some reason, I generally tend to root for teams in the NFC more than the AFC. So I guess maybe Seattle. Also because I think it would be very cleansing for Seattle to beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl after they just whiffed that horrible loss several years ago, where they threw it. They had one of the best running backs in the NFL, and they didn't give it to him, and they threw an interception instead at the goal line. So yeah, I don't have a favorite team, but I'd say if between the two on Sunday, I would be rooting for the Seahawks. Let's get to one more before we take a little break. This is iBunka Training says, first super chat at 56 years. Hooray. Thank you very much for sending in your first super chat. We'll do one more question just in celebration of that. Daniel Yao 8367 says, always love watching the videos you make. Keep it up. Thank you very much. I will do one more question. I want to answer a question before we take the break here. Zach Likes Movie 72 says, I was never a Markiplier kid, but there's something very sweet about what is happening with Iron Lung. I didn't even love the movie, but his video crying at the opening results got me choked up. Yes, I mean, I'll talk about this in my review, and I think I mentioned it on Charts as well. First of all, I'm not really into the gaming side of YouTube. I never really watched any of those channels. Secondly, I don't watch a whole lot of YouTube because I'm making stuff here. The stuff that I watch is generally boring stuff like weather and other movie stuff when I do watch YouTube. Old clips of Judge Judy for some reason lately. Can't explain that. So I don't really have any connection to Markiplier. But without going into, necessarily my thoughts on the film, good or bad, it is so great to see a story like this because, first of all, it's a win for independent cinema. I mean, this was done completely without the involvement of any studio, of any sort of mainstream marketing firm distribution. I mean, this was a movie that was set for a very small release. He activated a fan base and got them to reach out and get this theater booked nationwide. Which is, I have to imagine, I mean, it felt so good for me at Sundance for people to come up and say hi and say they watched the channel, because it was a confirmation for me that people are out there and they enjoy what I'm doing. And I can only imagine what it must feel like to make a movie and to say to your audience, hey, call your theaters, get them involved, get it shown, and it gets released around the world. That has to be such a great confirmation of what you're doing as a creator to be able to get your audience to do that. So that's a great story to see. It's a win for independent cinema. And the fact that it did so well, basically energizing a YouTube platform, very little to no traditional marketing, just completely outside of the system, for it to succeed to that degree is a very, very rare thing. And so it's something that I think is a real achievement as a box office guy, an industry guy who just recognizes that this is something that is not done very often. And I think a lot of studios are probably very jealous of it because they spend millions and millions of dollars to get people to come out, and they can't get them to come out in the same numbers that they just saw this guy from YouTube do. And I think that as a YouTube creator, it's a great story because it goes to show you the power of an audience. It goes to show you that if you put the time in, you put the energy in, if you build a fan base, if you build an audience, you take a risk artistically, creatively, personally to make this movie. You ask them to invest in that and to go to bat for it. And they do, and it succeeds. As somebody on the platform who aspires to build an audience in a similar way, that's great to see. It's great to see that that sort of thing can be done on this platform. And I think that it probably and hopefully will inspire other creators, YouTube creators, to say, hey, I want to make something. I have a script. I have a movie. I have a web series. I have a comic. I have a book, whatever it is. If they see this and that says to them, hey, this is possible. This is achievable because this is what he did, was able to do with his audience. I think that that's great. If you can inspire others to create and to branch out and maybe try to achieve their dreams, I think that's a great thing. I've seen, I think that for some people, I've seen almost a dismissiveness about it, where people are like, oh, that's nice. Oh, good for him. Oh, isn't that's so, to me, it's just, especially creators on the platform, to me, that's just such an undercutting of how impressive it is. I mean, it's not like this happens all the time at the movies. This almost never happens. So it's been great to see. Really, it does. I mean, and to see that it's has so personally affected him. I can only imagine the validation you have to feel and the gratitude, hopefully, that you feel toward your audience for this to happen. So yeah, I think it's a great story. I think it's a really great story, and it's been great to watch. So we have a lot more of your questions. We also have some more news stories that I want to talk to, but we got a sponsor this week as well. So we're going to take a little break here, about 75 seconds, to thank our sponsor for this show, and then we'll jump back into it. But thank you very much, Factor, for sponsoring this episode. This episode's brought to you by Factor. It's winter, it's cold, you're probably still sore from shoveling your driveway. The last thing you want to do is spend even more energy making a meal from scratch or driving to the store in the snow. That's where Factor comes in, with fully prepared meals crafted for you by professional chefs. Next week, they have one of my favorites on the menu, smoky Gouda chicken with peppers. It's a great winter meal, and all of Factor's meals have quality ingredients like lean proteins and healthy fats. And you're not going to get the same stuff over and over again. Factor has 100 rotating weekly meals to keep things fresh, with options that include high-protein meals, ready-to-eat salads, and calorie-smart options. Factor meals arrive to your door always fresh, never frozen, and they're ready to eat in about 2 minutes. I spend a lot of time crunching numbers and watching movies, and Factor is a great option for those days when I'm on a tight schedule and I want good food fast. Head to factormeals.com/Murrell50off and use code Murrell50off to get 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. New subscribers only, varies by plan. One free breakfast item per box for 1 year while subscription is active. All right. Thank you very much, Factor, for sponsoring this episode. And let's get into a couple more news stories I wanted to talk about. This one, of course, is old because the date has come and gone. But I wanted to mention this was just so bizarre to see play out. Conformity Gate. So Stranger Things ended on New Year's Eve. But then there was this whole theory that there was another secret episode that was going to be released in the spot where we got that documentary, which I think was a very fascinating and telling behind the scenes look at the production of that last season. There was this whole theory that the series finale was in fact not the series finale, and that there was an entire new final episode that would prove that the ending wasn't really the ending, and that it was basically, and I hate to say it, it seemed like a lot of people that were in denial, that saw the finale of the show and said, oh, no, that can't be the ending. They must be thinking of something much more clever than that. But they were wrong. There was no secret episode. The ending was the ending, and it's the way that social media works now is you don't necessarily have to have a huge number of people to believe something initially for the ball to get rolling. You need a small number of people, one or two videos that get a bunch of views, and then I think a couple of different things happen. Number one, you sway people to your side. They see one video about conformity gate with all of these different, look at their hands in this position, look at this and look at this number and think, and you can, and I think that you can find those connections if you're looking for them. And some people genuinely jump on board and they say, oh yeah, this is the thing. And then they make videos and the word spreads. And then I think that there's separately a group of people who see something like conformity gate spreading and they see dollar signs. They say, ooh, engagement. And so they jump on it, not necessarily because they think that there's this special episode, but because they know that other people do. And if they make a video about it, then other people are going to watch it. And then it spreads that way. And I think that that's how something like this can snowball. And then the media picks up on it and then it's on TV. But I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody who would actually think that there was a huge secret plan and that Netflix and the Duffer Brothers were going to fool everybody and unveil this episode. And it really it comes back to me of just like being in denial. And I get it. Listen, the series finale was not my favorite. I didn't think it was horrendous, but it certainly did not leave me like, oh, wow, what an amazing wrap up to this show. The whole last season to me felt like, you had 3 years and that was it. It just felt rushed in a strange way, which they weren't really rushed. I know that there were strikes and everything, but I don't know why it felt as rushed as it did because there's no reason for it to. I understand wanting something to be better, but I think that we live in a time now, and really I think that it comes down to the Snyder Cut. And again, I enjoyed the Snyder Cut, as I said many times. I actually, once it came out, I liked it. I definitely liked it better than the theatrical cut of Justice League, and I think that it in places was a very, very good movie. But I think that actually happening sort of re-energized people who, and we see it all the time, the people that were petitioning Disney to remake the sequel trilogy, the people that want them to resuscitate the Ben Solo movie, although I think showing legitimate interest there could maybe move the needle a little bit. The people that when something doesn't go their way with a franchise they like, I think the Snyder Cut kind of emboldened everyone to say, see, if we're loud enough, they're going to do it. And I think that excuse me, I got a little drip here. I think that what they're ignoring is that the Snyder Cut was born out of, more than anything, HBO Max premiering in 2020 amid a COVID pandemic where they didn't have really a whole lot of programming and no new movies coming out, big blockbuster movies, and they needed content and they needed something that would make news. They needed something that would draw attention to the platform. And so they gave Zack Snyder that money. I legitimately don't think that in a non-streaming, non-COVID world that the Snyder Cut would ever have happened. But I think that the message that sent to a lot of people was, if we're loud enough and we believe enough that this thing will happen, then it will happen. And I think that that's really what this whole conformity gate thing was. It was a lot of people that wanted to believe. They were like Fox Mulder. They wanted to believe that this wasn't the end. And I think they were emboldened by other things in the past to believe that was the case. I do think that it is pretty passionate. You have to be pretty passionate to think that this was the strategy that Netflix was going to go with, especially after everybody denied that it was even happening. And I don't know why they would do it that way. Like, why would you end your show in an unsatisfying way in order to trick people to watch the real episode with no publicity later? It just, I don't know why you would structure it that way, but there were people that just didn't want to let go and they didn't want to believe that this is how it ended. And that was how it ended. But I think that the whole conformity gate thing was a very interesting look at how fandom operates now, how, interaction between creators and fans operates now. and what our relationships with shows can be now, because now there is that sort of aspirational thing of like, well, if I don't like it, if I believe enough and or if I try hard enough, I can change it. And that's just not, in 99% of the cases out there, that's just not what's going to happen. But that was a very interesting thing to watch unfold. All right, one last news story before we get back to your questions, and this is about the Alamo Drafthouse. If you don't know the Alamo Drafthouse, they are a dine-in theater chain. And quickly, before I jump into the story, because I think you kind of need to know this, if you don't know how things operate at an Alamo Drafthouse, for years since their inception, their big thing has been no texting and no talking. And one of their appeals for people has been that they will rigorously enforce that policy. So if you report that somebody is texting or has their phone out in the theater, or if a staff member notices, you'll get a warning, and then the second time you're out, you're kicked out. It's like their thing. Their thing is they are the no phone theater. They're the last theater chain that's going to enforce this stuff. They're also a dine-in theater chain, which means that you get a menu when you sit down. You can order drinks, you can order food, and then during the show, you can reorder more drinks, you can order more food. And the way that it has worked up until now is that it's all on a pad and paper. So you have a pencil during the movie. If you want something else, you write it down on a little piece of paper. You put it in this little slot in front of your seat, and then the server will see it. They'll come pick it up, and you'll get your drink. And then at the end, they bring you your check. You sign your check. I've never been in the full cult of Alamo. I think it's a really, really cool chain because they program a lot of very awesome things. It really has been a home for cinephiles. It is a place where you also can be safe from the whole talking and texting thing. And that is why this change has been so controversial. So they announced that they are going to mobile ordering in all of their theaters. They're rolling it out over the course of the year. They're getting rid of the pen and paper. And what this means is that you will have to order even during the movie. If you want more food, if you want more drinks, you have to pull out your phone and order in their mobile app. And of course, a lot of people are not happy about this because Alamo's whole thing is no phones. This was the statement from Michael Kusterman, who is the CEO of the Alamo Drafthouse. He said, quote, "We continue to evolve as we must to protect the Alamo moviegoing experience as the entertainment landscape shifts around us without ever losing sight of who we are. Putting ordering control directly in our guests' hands allows us to move faster and more efficiently, creating a smoother, more responsive experience without added distraction. This new service model is a custom, smart, and flexible way to strengthen our long-term health, protect our future, and ensure that we can continue serving our guests, supporting our team, and reaffirming our love of cinema for years to come, no matter what's happening around us." Let's put aside that most of that statement is gibberish. It's corporate speak. It is. Break that statement down. Most of it is just filler words. Disagree wholeheartedly. First of all, if you are forcing audiences to be on their phone during a movie, then the easy thing, if somebody is texting during a movie, or if somebody is, even potentially trying to record something in a movie, the easy way out of it, if somebody confronts you about it, if a staff member comes up to you, is go, "Oh, no, I was ordering on my phone." Secondly, I know they say in their statement, they also say it's a custom dark app. So the light won't be a distraction because the app is dark. And no, because first of all, who's to say the app's going to be open when you open your phone? You're going to click, the phones are going to be lighting up throughout the show. It is going to be a distraction. I've seen some people say, well, the server's coming through is a distraction. The server's coming through is still going to be a distraction because they're still delivering the food. What I think that this is a move to do is to make things more efficient for money reasons. Now, they said that this doesn't mean that they're going to lay anybody off. They say, well, we're not going to lay anybody off. Sure, they might not lay people off, but who's to say if you do it this way, they say, okay, well, we don't need 4 servers for this show because of the mobile ordering app. Now we only need 2. So you're not being laid off, but we're going to cut your hours this week from 40 hours to 30 hours. I 100% think that this is a money move. They think this is more cost efficient. Alamo was bought by Sony. Sony is a big corporation. They don't care about, and this has happened time and time again. I've seen it happen. I've experienced it happen. Is somebody comes in and they buy a company or a brand or something like an Alamo that is very beloved by people, by diehard people, but the people that buy it, they don't care about that. They don't care about the legacy. They don't care about the fan experience. They don't care about the relationship with their existing fan base. They care about the third quarter and the fourth quarter and what were the profits in Q3 versus Q4. And if this move is going to potentially make a 10% difference in EBITDA figures in quarter four, then let's make sure that we do. They don't care. They don't care. Now, this has been getting pushback, as it should, from existing customers. The Austin Film Critics Association, which Austin is, like the home of the Alamo Drafthouse, has pushed back on it. So we'll see if this continues. But this is just another example, and it happens so many times. And it's why when people say, why are you so anti-corporation? Why are you so anti-corporate? Why are people so against big companies? Alamo would have gone out of business if Sony didn't buy. Maybe that's true. But at a certain point, if these changes keep getting made, at what point is Alamo even still Alamo? If a big corporation saves the company, but they come in and they make changes, and then it becomes no different than any other chain, then at what point is it even itself anymore? And I think that's the question. I mean, this would be like if here, especially in the South, Sonic is huge, a big chain. This would be like if Sonic announced, hey, from now on, for your convenience, you're going to have to walk up to a window to get your food instead of having these people bring it to your car. Well, no, that might be better for you as a company. Maybe you can cut hours, or maybe it's more convenient to the workflow, but that's Sonic's thing. That's their thing. That's what they're known for. That's why some people go there. And that, for me, is the whole thing with Alamo and phones. Alamo's thing for most people is you do not pull out your phone during a movie in an Alamo theater. If you do, you'll get asked to leave. And now that policy that the company wants to change it to, well, you don't pull out your phone for bad things during a movie, but there are some things where you have to. No. At that point, you're not the same company. At that point, you are not the Alamo that people love. And I think that that's what people are pushing back on. So dumb. This is why I'm always suspicious. I think that I was happy that Alamo was saved when Sony bought it. And I'd have to go back and look at my statements, but I know personally what I was thinking was, okay, well, it's great that they're still around, but let's see what happens. And I think that we're seeing now the biggest yet result of that, which is that these big corporations don't care about the vibe or the tradition or whatever. That's not what they're there for. And at a certain point, you have to ask, at what point is the thing you love not the thing you love anymore? So TBD on what's going to happen there. All right, let's get to the rest of your questions. And the first is from Film Chirp 42. Thoughts on EFUS or Rebuilding? EFUS, I believe, is the baseball movie, correct? I saw that. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a very interesting approach to it. I didn't love it as much as some people did, but Rebuilding I have not seen. So Black Bag 17, thank you for the question, by the way. Black Bag 17 says, Dan, you're the sweetest and most down-to-earth reviewer out there. Aw, shucks. I love your work. I've grown up with it, and I never get tired of it. Thanks for helping me through hard times. Wish I could give more. First of all, anything that any donate, any super chat, anything like that is much appreciated. Please don't wish that you could give more. I am grateful for what I'm able to get and what you're willing to give here on the show and elsewhere, even if it's just your time and your like and your subscribe. Thank you. And thank you for the compliment. It is interesting because there were a lot of people, and I said this on the Hangout show I did with Spencer and Joe, and I got a lot of it at Sundance. There was a super nice guy who produced one of the, was a producer on one of the movies in competition. There was another guy who I met who was with a distribution company, who both we met up and talked because they messaged me and said they were at Sundance, who were there, in a professional capacity. They're like, yeah, I grew up watching you. But it, I joke about it making me feel old, and it does. But both of them said, and this is like, to me, again, so profoundly impactful, watching Screen Junkies and watching your stuff and watching other stuff, on the internet, movie stuff, made me want to do this for a living. And so to know that in some way, large way or small way, that I could influence somebody to want to do this and even make movies for a living is like, first of all, again, imposter syndrome, red alert. Secondly, so meaningful. So it is great to see now that there's a generation that have grown up and grew up watching movie fights or Screen Junkies that now are active and watching and still engaging. And I appreciate that. I'm gonna have a little water in my. This is a very old Florida State cup. I think I bought that early 21st century. All right, let's see. Film Chart 42 said, thoughts on Nouvelle Vague and or Dust Bunny. I have not seen Dust Bunny. I did see Nouvelle Vague before the end of 2025. I mean, I love Richard Linklater. I thought that it was a well-made movie, but I didn't not enjoy it, but part of me was like, well, it's I could read about the making of Breathless and have nothing to me said, oh, this had to be a movie. I think that it was a really fun movie for Richard Linklater to do, and I think that it was well made, well acted, well shot, but it didn't bowl me over. I liked it. Creech 829 says, headed to my first film festival in Berlin. Any advice for just a normal person, not a critic, getting tickets to films? Well, I mean, I don't know if Berlin's system is in any way similar to Sundance's system. The way that Sundance would work if you were not a critic, and actually the way that it worked for me a lot of the time, because I did not get free tickets to any screening I wanted to go to. I could get into certain press screenings, but there was only one screening per movie. So if there was a conflict, then I didn't get access to a specific press screening. So a lot of times I was either buying tickets for myself, but a lot of them were sold out, or I was joining the wait list, which is where you just go and you hope that maybe you can get in if enough ticket buyers don't show up. So I don't know what the similarities are between Berlin and Sundance, if any, but I would say generally, number one, if there is a pre-sale of any kind for tickets, then make sure that you are available for that, because a lot of things will probably sell out quickly. Number two would be to always check back if they're selling those tickets online. Again, I don't know what Berlin's setup is. Always keep checking, because tickets will open up, people will cancel. Sometimes if you time it just right, then you could maybe grab a ticket to a movie that was previously sold out. And then if there is a wait list option, I'd say take advantage of that. I think I did 4 or 5 wait lists at Sundance. I got in about half the time, and then half the time they said, sorry, it's full. And you go, okay. And you just go find another movie to see, or figure out a way to fill that hole in your schedule. So I guess be flexible would be my advice. Be flexible and be prepared. Know when tickets go on sale. If they go on sale, buy what you can early. Always keep an eye on those avenues to buy tickets to see if more open up. And then if you can join a wait list, or if you can just keep checking right up until the moment, if there's a movie you want to see, keep your schedule open, because you might be able to figure out a way to get into it. Black Bag 17 says, also, I love the recent Friends podcast episode. Can't wait for more. You guys are the best. Long live the Comfort Colors 1717 Adult Heavyweight Tee. If you did not watch the Hangout show I did with Joe and Spencer, and we're trying to do another one soon, one of the things that we talked about quite a bit was Spencer's quest for the perfect t-shirt. And he says it's the Comfort Colors 1717 Adult Heavyweight, which is apparently quite affordable. So not a sponsor, by the way. That's just Spencer's choice. Dylan Fitzsimmons says, hey, Dan, on your Letterboxd account, you currently have Superman 1978 rated 1 star. I'm sure it's a typo, knowing your thoughts already. Yeah, that's not correct. Oh, man. See, this is why I don't do star ratings. Number one, because people actually look at them. Number two, because especially on the app, or even on the website, it's so easy. If you brush your thumb, or if you brush your mouse across the stars unintentionally, you don't have to do a secondary thing, and it'll scoot your rating way down, because I've seen that happen before. Yeah, no, my rating for Superman 1978 is definitely not 1 star. It must have been a case where I was going through rating things and my thumb just swiped left across the stars without me knowing. So I guess I'll have to go back and double check that rating. Thanks for the heads up. Emir Hades says, what is your Mount Rushmore of Disney low points? My Mount Rushmore of Disney low points. I mean, Disney is an old company. So they've had a lot of low points in the past. I think you have to put Rise of Skywalker up there, because it just was the confirmation. It was the ultimate ending for that whole process of not having a plan for the sequel trilogy. And that was the Rise of Skywalker, just like a thing that was the second one. No, don't worry about the second movie. Forget that. Keep this, go back to that, reset that. So I think you'd have to put, I think you would have to put Rise of Skywalker up there. Secret Invasion, maybe, I think would have to go up there because that was the culmination of like iconic Marvel storyline. One of the ones that people were so looking forward to turned into the worst possible version you could imagine for streaming. So Secret Invasion, I think, would definitely have to go up there. I mean, again, if you're going back to like the Disney of the 50s and 60s, they certainly had box office lows. I mean, even though there are many people that love this movie, I think you'd have to put like Black Cauldron up there because that was sort of considered Disney bottoming out in the 80s and forcing them to make that turn that eventually led them to the Renaissance. So like maybe Black Cauldron, Secret Invasion, Rise of Skywalker. Man, I don't know. I don't know what else I'd put up there. I just feel like there's such a mercurial company. Like the live action movies, I don't love, but most of them have made money. I don't think that Snow White was such a historic bomb that I'd be like, that's a Mount Rushmore Disney failure. Yeah, I don't know. Those are the three that come to mind. And then I would say like keep one of those faces blank because who knows what the future holds, or there's probably something in the past I forgot about. John McTierlist says, hi from Tasmania. I've been watching your videos for years now, and I've always appreciated what you have to say. Top 3 most anticipated films this year. People keep asking, and I usually do that 2026 preview video. I wasn't able to do it this year because of everything else that was going on. And so I'm not as well versed in what exactly is coming out this year. The Odyssey, I guess it would probably like my basic answers would be the Odyssey, Dune Part 3, and Avengers Doomsday, because I'm just so curious about what's going to happen with Avengers Doomsday. But there are so many more movies that are coming out this year. I'm sure that there's probably one like this Disclosure Day might be up there. Maybe I'll take Doomsday off and I'll put Disclosure Day, which is the new Spielberg movie, up there. And there's probably one or two even that I could take off and put something else on. But I got to get more versed in what's coming out this year because I didn't do that full rundown this year. Austin Hurst says, off topic, but top 5 underrated crime thriller gems. Thank you for the super chat, but I off the top of my head, I don't know if I could come up with 5. The one that really that I always talk about that I have on DVD still because it has not come out on any high definition format is one called Confidence, which is Edward Burns and Andy Garcia and Rachel Weisz and Dustin Hoffman. And it's just a classic kind of caper type film, con man film, but that I really liked. And I never really hear anybody talk about it. And like I said, I've got it on DVD. Now, I haven't watched it in a very long time, but I think by nature, you'd have to say it was underrated because I don't think anybody's seen it. You can't get it on Blu-ray. Maybe you can rent it. I don't know. But yeah, Confidence is the one that jumps up to the top of the pile for me. As far, if you're going to say underrated. Film Chart 42 says, do you think Bucky could lead his own film? That's Bucky right there, by the way. Mascot of the amazing convenience store and gas station chain Buc-ee's. Yes, absolutely Bucky could lead his own film. And quite frankly, I'm kind of surprised that Buc-ee's hasn't bankrolled a Bucky movie already. He's such a breakout star on TikTok and social media. Yes, I think Bucky could definitely be the lead of his own franchise. Ben Zayton 933 says, hey, Dan, too tired for an eloquent question. It's 11:20 p.m. here. Oh, it's even later because it took me so long to get there. I hope you're still awake. So I just wanted to say how much I enjoy your insights, numbers, and thoughts. Night. Good night. I'm sorry if I kept you up. Watery Wings 3 just sent a super sticker. You know what? Stickers are great. But what's better than a super sticker? Thank you very much, Watery Wings 3. Peter Parker SL says, is there a possibility the song performers during the Oscars take a stand and refuse to play in solidarity? Or is there too much clout, money, and ego involved? Would definitely send a message. Well, that was in her full statement. That's what Diane Warren was advocating for. She said, we as nominees have to band together and say it's all of us or none of us. Now, I think that's easier for her to say because she is one of the songs that is not slated to be performed. And I think that puts pressure on the people that are going to perform to say, okay, yes, we're willing to give up this spotlight on one of the biggest movie events of the year. At one time, one of the biggest globally watched broadcasts of the year, probably still a very highly watched broadcast. I think that puts a lot of pressure on them that maybe is not fair. To say, oh, well, so either we have to give up our spot on the Oscars or we have to look like we're not in solidarity with our nominees. The onus should go on the producers. But that's what Diane Warren was calling for. She said that Lady Gaga's done it in the past and that that's what should be done now. I don't know necessarily if any of the people that are going to perform here in the US and with the Academy have the same sway as Lady Gaga. Not to say that they're not very popular, but I don't know if they would have that same weight. But that's certainly what Diane Warren wants. I was reading one article that brought up kind of an interesting thing, which is that when the Oscars move to YouTube in a few years, which is going to be a trip for the Oscars to be airing on YouTube, but I think actually makes sense given the sort of multi-platform world that we live in, but that these time constraint things are going to be sort of moot because you're not going to be on a network that has to make way for the local news. So it'll be interesting once it goes to YouTube to see if these time constraint things are still an issue. CMK899 says, are you a Muppets fan? If so, what is your favorite Muppet film? I am a Muppets fan. Yeah, I watched Sesame Street growing up, and I like the Muppet movies. I think they're all generally pretty funny, and they all, the Muppets always, well, not always, but the Muppets originally were as much for adults as for kids. And I think that the Muppet movies, for example, is like some of the greatest comedians of all time. It's got some jokes in there that are not necessarily for kids. My favorite Muppet movie, man, probably Muppet Christmas Carol. Yeah, it's probably Muppet Christmas Carol, or maybe the first one, the Muppet movie. But I watched them all, Muppets Take Manhattan and all those movies growing up. That's where I learned who Charles Grodin was. No, that was the Great Muppet Caper, I think, that had Charles Grodin in it. And Diana Rigg. I think that's where I knew both of them from initially when I was a kid. But yeah, I'd say if you're going to force me to choose a favorite, I'd probably say Muppet Christmas Carol. That's just a good movie. And Michael Caine, come on. Raygun on 3NF says, hi, Dan. You mentioned that you finished Attack on Titan before, but never your actual thoughts on it. I'm curious what you thought about it overall, and particularly with Eren as a character. Yeah, I did finish Attack on Titan. I loved the first half of it or so. And then for me, at least, I thought it got kind of lost in the weeds for a while. I'm just like, okay, where are we going? It just got very complicated, and I don't mind complicated, but it was just a little too complicated for me. But then by the end, I thought that it kind of brought it back around to the core of the story and the characters. And it's been a while since I finished it, so I don't know if I had strong feelings on any particular on Eren's arc or anything like that. But yeah, I would say it really had me hooked for a while. And then, and if you've seen the show, you know what I'm talking about. It kind of takes a turn, and I thought it got sort of a little too dense for me, and then kind of cleared out a bit toward the end. But I figured, why even walk into that on the channel? Because it's just going to be people that are upset with me about it, and it didn't seem that important. Ruari G said, do you think the third movie in the new 28 years will still get made? Box office numbers are meant to be low despite high praise from critics and audience. Man, what's happened with 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple is so sad, because I think it's a really good movie. And I do think that it is paying the price for Danny Boyle being a bit more divisive with the last one. And so people aren't going to see this one. And I don't think that that's fair to this one. It didn't have a great release window in January, not a whole lot of promotion, or not as much as the other ones did. I don't want to get too much into spoilers, but I think that what the end of The Bone Temple promised was big enough for the movie, for the third one, to potentially get greenlit. And I hope that it is, but Bone Temple there's just such low viewership for Bone Temple that, like, I worry that they're just going to play it safe. Yeah, the whole Bone Temple thing's just been such a bummer for me, because I think it was better than 28 Years Later. But because Danny Boyle, especially that ending, it just left so many people on their back foot that I don't think they bothered with this one. And that's a shame. Trappy Jenkins says, super appreciate your continued existence, buddy. Thank you, Trappy Jenkins. I appreciate your continued existence, and also my own. I'm very happy that I'm still here. Ruthie Henshall fan 99 says, hey, Dan, hope you're well. Here's hoping the new Disney CEO is pro-physical media and more than willing to open up the old Disney and Fox vaults to other distributors. I mean, as much as I hate to say it, I can't see any CEO being strongly pro physical media right now, especially at Disney, where Disney Plus is such a thing. I do think that we are seeing some breaking of the ice when it comes to licensing. We just saw Amazon license James Bond films out to Netflix. I think that these companies are realizing what a lot of people have already seen and what Sony is known from the beginning, which is, yeah, sure, you can build your own platform, but licensing is very lucrative. So I also hope that Disney and Fox and other studios are a little bit more open to, at least, you hear those stories about Disney and Fox cracking down on revival screenings even of their films. Like, it doesn't do anybody any favors to have all of your stuff locked in one place, um, where nobody can get to it. So I also hope that we continue to see a bit of a change there. Ferris EB, thank you very much, says, I'm here late. Sorry if you've kind of already addressed this, but did Sundance affect your view on how many good films don't get a chance to find a wider audience each year? Do you have thoughts on how that could be improved? It did, actually. Here's a picture I didn't show earlier. Here's a picture of me at Sundance. It did change my thoughts on, because I did get to see so many more movies this year. And even post festival, there are so many really good movies. Excuse me. I'm not getting choked up. There's a little air there. There are so many really good movies that I saw that I was like, oh, that'll get acquired, that still have not been publicly announced to have been acquired. There's a great movie starring Ethan Hawke called The Wait that I thought was a no-brainer. I'm like, oh, this will get bought by tomorrow. And I haven't seen any news on that unless it broke today. And there are so many other movies. There's a little Japanese film called Burn that I thought was really good that I don't think has a whisper or a shadow of a hope of getting picked up by a big distributor here and getting a meaningful release in theaters, maybe on streaming. I mean, maybe Netflix will buy it and throw it out one day. But yeah, I mean, I think it gave me even more perspective because I could see more films. It wasn't just limited to the online selection. I could go to the ones that were also playing only there in person, and I could see how good they were and see over these last several days how many of them still haven't been picked up. It did give me new perspective on how many great movies are out there that aren't seen and that people may not see or may not ever see. And it just, for me, reinforces why I wanted to go. Do I wish that maybe my Sundance coverage had done better views wise? Sure. For personal reasons, because Sundance was an investment. And I think that those videos covered maybe like 2 nights of my hotel stay, but also because I want, it validated doing it because I want to give those movies exposure. I want people to, if they see it on Netflix or if they see that it's on a streaming service or if they see it on VOD or something, to say, oh, is that movie that Dan talked about at Sundance? Yeah, that sounded good. Let's check that out. They need exposure like that. And that festivals are one of the only places that'll do that. That will put the new Seth Rogen, Olivia Wilde movie, which sold for $10 million plus to A24, on the same level as this divorce drama from Lithuania or this mountain documentary from Montenegro. I mean, they're all at the festival, and some of them are even get equal amounts of buzz. So I think it did underscore to me the importance of having these festivals. And also, I think that as far as improvements go, I think you just have to have distributors that are willing to take a chance on something bold. Not all of them are. Just a Duck 1652, you're not fooling anybody, says, are you going to do a full review of Josephine? Probably. I thought about doing it while I was in Park City, but my schedule was just so packed. At this point, that's another one. Josephine swept the awards at Sundance. I have seen no news about Josephine getting acquired for distribution. This one stars Channing Tatum and Gemma Chan. It's a tough movie to watch, and it's tough. I get that it would be a tough sell, and it deals with very sensitive subject matter. It's not a crowd pleaser. Excuse me. There's my text dinging there. It's not a crowd pleaser necessarily, but it was at Sundance. But it's tough to sell. I get it's not easy to market, and so I think that's why it hasn't been picked up. Or a distributor scared because of the subject matter, and because it is so frank about that subject matter. But I'm shocked that it hasn't been picked up.
I will probably do when it gets it. I mean, I can't imagine it's not going to get distributed. So when it comes out, I think would probably be my next shot at doing a full review. I'm also going to do a full rundown of everything I saw at Sundance, probably this weekend. So if you missed some of my Sundance coverage, or if there are movies that you didn't hear me talk about, then you can stay tuned here on the channel. I'm going to do a rundown of all 38 movies, kind of tiered into what I liked the most and what I thought was the best, and stuff that was just okay. I didn't really see anything that I 100% didn't like, which is good. Excuse me. Dylan Fitzsimmons says, favorite Matt Damon movie / performance. I mean, I love The Departed. And even if that's not my necessarily favorite Matt Damon movie, that might be my favorite Matt Damon performance. Because he's such a weasel in that movie. And I love that scene where he finally gets confronted by DiCaprio, and he just sounds like a kid, like a child, like just a petulant child. And so I think there's a lot more layers to his performance in that movie than maybe even he gets credit for. I loved him as Jason Bourne too. I thought he was great as Jason Bourne. Favorite Matt Damon movie? I mean, again, The Departed or Good Will Hunting, maybe, or maybe The Bourne Supremacy. Yeah, I'd have to think about it for a minute, but Matt Damon's been in a lot of great movies. I like Matt Damon. Dylan Fitzsimmons says favorite Ben Affleck movie or performance. Ben Affleck. I like Ben Affleck. I love that his career took a completely different path. I'm trying to think now. I have to readjust to Affleck over Damon. I don't think that Affleck has as many that are eligible for best movie or best performance, although I do like him a lot. I mean, Argo, it's a really good movie. I think he's good in that movie. I think he's great in Good Will Hunting. I think his performance is great in Good Will Hunting. I think because he chose the blockbuster route for so long, he gets kind of a bad rap. He's not a bad actor. He's been bad in some movies. Yes, he has, but he's also been in some good movies, and he's been good in those movies. So, Gone Girl, maybe. Yeah. Favorite Ben Affleck movie would be Gone Girl, I think, unless I'm missing something. Favorite performance could be Good Will Hunting, although I like him in Kevin Smith's movies because he gets to have fun, and you can tell he's having fun. Emir Haiti says Halloween ranked. I thought about doing that for a while. I can't do it off the top of my head, but I can tell you that the new movies, Halloween 2018 would be somewhere in the middle, and the last two new movies would be somewhere near the bottom. The first Halloween would be number one easily, and then I think the middle would be where it would be tougher for me to do it. But maybe for Halloween this year, I don't know. I've done stuff on Halloween before on the channel, and it didn't really traffic very well, which kind of made me think that nobody was interested. Dylan Fitzsimmons says, how would you rank the Lord of the Rings trilogy? For me, Fellowship has always been my favorite, and still is, and is always when I'm watching it. Then I would go Return of the King and Two Towers. Pretty definitively. It's not a tough call for me. They're all great movies, but for me, it's pretty easy for me to rank it. Fellowship, Return of the King, Two Towers. Gerardo Ariano 990 says, best / recommended New York City theater. I haven't been to a whole lot of theaters in New York City, and the ones that I've been to have mostly been AMC's. I went to the Alamo Drafthouse in Lower Manhattan, and that was a pretty good theater. But I don't have a huge, excuse me, I don't have a huge backlog or of experience when it comes to, and I'm sure there are some great repertory theaters in New York, some great independent theaters in New York. I haven't really had a chance to visit those, so I'm not the best person to ask. I've been to the AMC Empire and the AMC in Lincoln Center. I haven't really been to a lot of great theaters in New York. I should change that. David Beat a Bomb says, hey, Dan, followed you since your Little Mermaid review. Wow. I'm happy. That's just like such an interesting movie to be like, that's the one where you found me. Happy you achieved your goal going to Sundance. Did you dive into the heated rivalry craze over the holidays? Sad to never see it on Nielsen. I have not taken a dive into the heated rivalry craze. This does bring up something interesting though, because I keep getting questions about that show and the Nielsen ratings. And so I'll answer it here as well. I've answered it in the comments elsewhere. So a lot of people have said heated rivalry was such a big deal. Why is it never in the Nielsen ratings, or why hasn't it been so far? And I did a little bit of research, and the thing with heated rivalry is by Nielsen's measurement, it is not considered an original streaming series. So they have two different categories when it comes to streaming shows: original series and library or acquired series. And the acquired bucket includes stuff like Grey's Anatomy and NCIS and Law and Order and Bob's Burgers and SpongeBob SquarePants and Bluey. All of these movies, I think, yeah, Bluey's in the acquired series. All of these shows that have so much watch time because people just put them on repeat because they've got hundreds and hundreds of episodes, some of them. And so for pure watch time, it is hard for a show like Heated Rivalry, which has like what, 6 or 8 episodes, to break into that category. Whereas if it was in the originals category, most of those shows do have 6, 8, 10, 20 episodes. So I think that's why you haven't seen Heated Rivalry on the Nielsen charts, because it's up against these juggernaut shows that just accumulate all of this watch time from people binging the episodes or putting them on in the background. But I did not dive into it. I've heard that it's good. It just hit at a time. I had planned, my plan after Christmas, when I got home on Christmas, was to dive into like a lot more movies that I hadn't seen and maybe to watch stuff like Heated Rivalry. But I got home on the 25th on Christmas Day. I had to leave again unexpectedly on the 28th, I think, or 29th. I was gone for like a week. I came back for 3 days. I was gone for another 5 days. I was here for 3 days, and I was gone for 2 weeks for Sundance. I think I did the math of the last 45 days. I think I've been home here like 12 or 13 of those 45 days. So I'm behind on stuff. But I'm sure I will eventually watch Heated Rivalry. Let's see. We got that one. Damian Fenton says, "Hi, Dan. Really love the channel. If a publisher invited you to write a nonfiction book about anything to do with movies, what topic would you choose?" I've actually thought about this before. I think I'm known for charts, and I've considered maybe even trying to see if I could do this on my own, do a Tales from the Box Office book, where I pick, certain movies, or maybe even like a summer, but each chapter would be an individual story. So Titanic, for example, The Greatest Showman would be a great one. And even a movie like Joker Folie à Deux, where it was a sequel that so catastrophically came in lower than the one before it. Something that's interesting about either a period of time or a specific movie at the box office, and then tell the story of that movie, not like the whole production story, but a little bit about the production, why it did so well or didn't do so well, and maybe what played into that. I think that would be interesting, and it kind of plays into what people might know me from. So yeah, as you can tell, I've actually kind of thought about doing that, but it's also like, where would I fit that into what I do? But that would be, if someone came to me with that idea, yeah, let's do it. Ferris EB says, "Just returned from the mountains. Do you ski or snowboard at all? If not, any interest in trying sometime?" I went skiing when I was in high school. My church went on a ski trip every spring break, and I went, I think, every year from like 7th to 12th grade, and really enjoyed it. I have not been on a pair of skis since I was 18 years old, 17 or 18 years old. I did enjoy it when I did it. I was never particularly good at it, but I enjoyed doing it. I'm a little worried now that if I got on a pair of skis, my knees and or ankles would just explode, just like turn to dust. So I had to weigh whether or not that's actually going to happen. But I did enjoy it when I did it in the past. FreakStomp95 says, "How is Utah in general? How'd your mom do in the storm? Hopefully the Boulder Karens don't scare you away from the new location. Let me know if you need some tips for the area." It's interesting because I heard that the reason that Sundance left Park City was because there were some, whatever you want to call them, Karens or NIMBYs or whatever, people that were locals that were tired of the festival. I heard that was one reason why they left. And now I hear that that could be a problem in Boulder. I have no idea. Utah in general, I enjoyed. Now, I understand I was in a little bubble. I was in one city for 11 days or 12 days with a lot of people who were visiting as well. But I did meet and speak to a lot of people who were local, who were either lived in Park City or lived nearby and drove to come into the festival. Without exception, every single person I talked to was great. And it's probably because we were all there for the same reason, but it was one of the easiest times I've ever had making conversation, friendly conversation, meeting people. And Park City was beautiful, even though there was no snow on the ground. And that was to address your second question, how my mom did in the storm. I was in Park City where there was no snow at all. I mean, there was a little bit left from where it had snowed earlier this year. And while I was gone here in Arkansas, there was like a foot of snow on the ground. It was like the biggest winter storm in decades that came through. My mom did fine. She lives on a street that gets closed down because to get to her house, you have to go up this pretty big hill, and it closes immediately because everyone always gets stuck. So whenever winter weather's coming in, she prepares, and she is always ready. And in case she has to stay in the house, I was calling her when the snow came in. I was calling her just about every day because I wanted to make sure the power had stayed on. Luckily, it was more snow than ice, so there weren't any power problems where my mom was. Because I knew that she wouldn't tell me if her power went out, because she'd be like, "Well, I don't want to ruin his time in Utah." I get it, but you got to check on your mom. But yeah, she did great. Thanks for asking. But yeah, it was so weird to be in Utah where there was no snow, and here there was like all the snow. Wolfram and Hart says, was curious if Zootopia 2's success and Gary DeSnake coinciding with China's Year of the Snake, a script for sequel expanding to birds to expect a 2029 release, and a chicken star with Year of the Rooster. Okay, I think I sorry, I'm just kind of piecing through that. So do I think that Disney plans Zootopia 2 to co-star a snake in the Year of the Snake in China? I've seen people say this. This is one of the reasons why it's so successful. It wouldn't shock me, but I can't say, oh, that was definitely their plan all along. I guess we'll have to get to 2029. If they do Zootopia 3 and it stars the Chinese animal that year, then we'll say, oh, Disney's doing it on purpose. If it was a plan, obviously it worked, because as we talked about, Zootopia 2 has made more money in China than any other Hollywood film ever, which is pretty exciting. AMH1117, wow, geez, Louise, just send a super sticker. Thank you so much. That is incredibly generous of you. Very much appreciated. MJ Hater 1985 says, I believe Ebert would have loved the first Despicable Me and hated the others. He made a movie on its own terms. I agree. That's what I loved about Ebert. He didn't draw a line and say, I only like these kinds of movies. And it informed how I started to watch movies. And that's how I try to approach it too. He did approach every movie on its own terms. And I agree. I think he probably would have liked Despicable Me, and maybe even Despicable Me 2. But I think he would have loathed the Minions movies. I really do. I think he would have absolutely loathed them. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think he would have. Crash Wreck says, are film festivals / Sundance the best for movie etiquette, or is there still an occasional issue with talkers, phones, late arrivals? Are there snacks for every showing? Did you eat popcorn 38 times? I did not eat popcorn 38 times. There were some theaters that sold concessions and some that did not. I'd say it was about a 40-60 split. About 40% of them did, and I'd say the majority did not. But theater etiquette was impeccable. I didn't really see. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 shows where I even saw a phone come out, but nobody was on their phone the entire time. Everybody's there because they love movies. Late arrivals, I don't think, are even really a possibility because there's volunteers, and if you're not there when the show starts or 5 minutes before the show starts, they give your seat away because there's always people waiting to get in. So you can't arrive late, because if you get there late, you don't have a seat anymore. So really nothing with late arrivals. Talking, didn't hear a peep from most people. Phones, very rare to even see one come out. So yeah, it was like the dream for a movie lover, because they didn't have to worry about theater etiquette. Everybody was on their best behavior. Dylan Fitzsimmons says, favorite X-Men movie. Probably Logan. If we're talking about X-Men proper, probably either X2, X-Men United, or First Class. Days of Future Past is up there. I'd probably say, if we're a proper X-Men movie, probably X-Men 2. Overall, probably Logan. Wayne Rose says, really curious to hear what you think about Darren Aronofsky's AI show. I did a little bit of research into that. I actually thought about adding it to the rundown today. I didn't really know anything about it till I think yesterday. So I guess Darren Aronofsky made a Revolutionary War show for a certain platform that he did using AI, generative AI. And, it's just, I just rather Darren Aronofsky spend his time on something else. Like, why do you choose your time to spend your time on that? And as a director, when you make an entire show with generative AI, then you are not using humans for those jobs. what I just don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't understand why he would choose to do that. Because I think that it does kind of hasten to the potential decision from some people that what you do as a director isn't necessary. Yeah, sure, you got hired to make this one, but they're not going to pay you Darren Aronofsky to make these things if they prove to be viable. So, yes, it's a curious choice for me. I just don't understand it. I, I I think that there are some purposes where you can have a discussion about the usage of AI. A discussion. I don't think there's a blanket yes for any use. I also don't think there's a blanket no for some uses. But I don't understand why he would do that. It's just an odd choice to me. Sweelthon says, "Hey Dan, can you tell us about how movie fights ended? I remember I was surprised on a Tuesday when it wasn't uploaded. Always wondered what happened." I mean, I can't really. We had already made the choice when I was there to do it more occasionally. Well, I don't know if it was a choice necessarily. The choice had been made by some that it would not be a weekly show anymore. We did, I think the last one we did was official one that we did that I was there for was the one we did on Oscar night 2020, which was right before COVID. And obviously COVID kind of put the brakes on a lot of stuff. But as for why it was never brought back or why it wasn't done more occasionally afterwards, I can't answer that because that was after my time there. So I don't know what the decision making on that was, but I sure wish they'd bring the show back because I love doing it. Clay7729 says, "Hey Dan, just curious about your process as a critic. Do you bring a pen and pad and take notes during or after movies, or do you mentally process it all until you get home?" I used to take a pen and pad with me early on when I first started reviewing movies because I read that's how Roger Ebert did it. And Roger Ebert was kind of my North Star when it came to being a film critic. And a lot of other people that I respected that were critics I knew took notes. I find it distracting. I find that if I'm writing during a movie, I'm not fully engaged with what's going on, either because my mind is split between what I'm writing and what's happening on the screen, or because I'm trying to make sure that, like, looking down at the paper, oh, am I writing off the page? So note taking doesn't really work for me during a movie. So what I will take mental notes. I'll take mental notes. Usually, if there's something I want to make sure I don't forget, I'll write it down afterwards. I'll make a note in my phone or something. But I don't take notes during a movie. It doesn't work for me. It works for some people. Makoto is the best pro tag 1870 says the shareholder dick riding needs to stop. This takes away from the Alamo's mission, whatever happened to just making money to keep their company afloat and not worrying about one-upping the year before. I mean, I agree. The model of constant uninterrupted growth is killing so many companies. This idea that the company's not successful unless every quarter is 5% higher than the last quarter and every year is 10% higher than the last year. I don't know if the math works on that. Just take the spirit of what I'm saying. But this idea of, like, a company's not healthy unless it is always growing, I think is crushing companies because costs are being cut, and then the companies will go out of business because they'll cut costs so much that consumers give up, and they'll say, "What happened to that company?" It's because it's being placed under unrealistic expectations. And also people that just neglect, well, what is this company's role? What is Alamo Drafthouse's role right now? I think their role, personally, and from my experience going to Alamo, I think their role is to provide a somewhat premium experience for people who put a high value on the viewing experience and will pay Alamo that value and will order food and drinks from them in exchange for their policies that say, if you come to one of our movies, nobody's going to be on their phone. They're now compromising that. That to me is a disconnect for the people that own Alamo Drafthouse, Sony, to an understanding of what the mission of that company is and what the role of that company is. You're compromising the role of Alamo Drafthouse to its consumers, to its customers. And when you compromise that role, the result is they will stop coming. They will go somewhere that's cheaper. That's what's going to happen. And then profits will drop and they'll cut costs more. And then attendance will drop more and they'll cut costs more. And then it'll go out of business. And everybody will say, well, what happened to Alamo? and the company will blame it on the consumer, as they always do, when the fact is you compromised their role. You compromised their role to moviegoers, and that's why it didn't do well. So yes, I agree. There needs to be a consideration for what a company's role is and what it means to people, in addition to the financial health of the company. Sorry, you got me on a tangent there. Ferris EB says Alamo has awesome labor organizers. Google how to support them if you're concerned about the mobile ordering change, as I am. I agree that the employees at Alamo have been doing great with that sort of stuff. Phil Smith, 5500 says, hi, Dan. With Avengers and Dune both scheduled for the same date, how do you think the PLFs will work out? I missed the start, so apologies if I've already covered it. No, we actually haven't mentioned that. That's been another thing going on. From what I've read, Dune has a 3-week exclusive on IMAX. It was either 2 or 3 weeks. So if Avengers Doomsday sticks to its current schedule, it will not have IMAX screens for its first 2 to 3 weeks, because contractually Dune has them. Now, other PLFs like Dolby, et cetera, I don't know what contracts are in place, but IMAX specifically, Dune has an exclusivity window. So if Doomsday doesn't move, then it's going to lose out on some of those premium screens. That's why I think a lot of people are saying like, oh, well, Dune will move because Avengers is Avengers. So Dune will move off that date and give it to Avengers. Why would they? They've already got the premium screens locked up. Avengers should move. If one of them is going to move, it should be Avengers. And I think if one of them does move, it's going to be Avengers. But I mean, I saw Robert Downey Jr. and Timothée Chalamet are already trying to make Doomsday a thing. Dune and Doomsday. So maybe they're trying to go for that whole Oppenheimer thing. It worked out great for Barbie. Oppenheimer had a lock on all of the premium screens when it came out. Barbie did just fine. Barbie did better. So, I don't think it's all doom and gloom, no pun intended, if Avengers doesn't have those premium screens, or at least the IMAX screens. Damian Briga says, have you noticed how insanely backloaded this movie year is? Whole lot of nothing until June, but then far more interesting choices once July rolls in. Well, you know what? I was actually going through today and looking at putting some stuff on my calendar. So we have Wuthering Heights, Scream 7, and The Bride, and a Pixar movie in February. That's not so bad. The Bride and Hoppers is in early March. We've got Project Hail Mary in mid-March. I've heard some good stuff about that. Ready or Not 2 is in mid-March. The Drama, which is kind of buzzy, Pattinson's Zendaya thing, I think, is in early April. Michael is in April, the Michael Jackson movie. That's got a potential. Early May, you've got Devil Wears Prada 2. You got Mortal Kombat 2. You've got Mandalorian and Grogu. June, you've got Masters of the Universe, Scary Movie 6, the Spielberg movie, Toy Story 5, Supergirl. So, I think that it might pick up a little bit after July, but I was just looking at the first half of the year, coincidentally today. I don't think it's empty, but it is backloaded. I think that's just kind of how it works now. People want that end of the year momentum. Ite Daniele 321 says, does reading the book first ever ruin the movie for you? For me, I can't stop nitpicking the film's version versus my own headcanon. Just had this experience with The Long Walk. Love from Israel. Thank you very much. If I have a choice, if a movie is coming out, I do often choose not to read the book in advance of the movie, because I want to judge the movie based on its own merits. I don't want to judge it in comparison to the book. I think the only thing that bothers me, I don't mind if a movie's different from a book. What bothers me is if I feel like a movie violates the spirit or the point of a book, or like I felt how Watchmen did. I felt that the Watchmen movie, while very stylistic and very faithful in a lot of ways, and well acted in many areas, I felt like the Watchmen movie in some ways was almost, it either missed the point of the Watchmen graphic novel, or in some places represented the antithesis of what the graphic novel was supposed to say or was saying. So that's really when it bothers me. It's not necessarily if a movie is different from a book. It's if I feel like it's missed the point of a book. Excuse me, I'm going to drink water here. I've been sitting in movies a lot. I haven't been talking a lot lately, so my voice is a little more sensitive than usual. Dominique, and you all have answered. You sent so many questions, and we're already at an hour and a half. I will say, I still have a big backlog of questions. So, please, if you're going to send any questions in, send them now, because I am going to hit a point at some point where I'm just going to I'm going to answer everybody's question, but I still have a lot to get through. So Send them in now, and then I'll make sure that you all get answered. Dominique and Souza says, I know you said you don't watch many TV shows, but have you been following any recent TV shows season to season besides Stranger Things that I know because you review it on the channel? I'm watching The Pit this year. I didn't watch it in real time last year. And then I heard how good it was. And so I am watching it. I need to catch up because I didn't watch any when I was in Utah, but I am following The Pit week to week. And Severance, I'm now following season to season, although it could be 2 or 3 more years till Severance hits again. I'm trying to think if there's any others that I'm definitively following season to season. I catch up on a lot of stuff. I'll usually like Fallout, for example. I haven't watched any of Fallout season 2, but I think the second season just ended. So probably in the next month or so, I'll sit down and watch all of Fallout. One Piece I'll probably watch when the second season premieres because a lot of people are curious about it, and because I liked the first season, and I think people would want to hear me talk about it on the channel. But generally, the only thing that I will watch, with a few exceptions like The Pit, is something that I feel like, okay, I think people would be interested in hearing about this on the channel, and not in 6 months when I see it, but today. And that's when I'll follow it kind of in real time. Damian Barriga says, part 2 to my last question. Don't you ever feel like you could schedule a month/year of movies far better than the Dumbbell Studios can? Many decisions baffle me. I mean, there are some studio decisions that also are confusing to me. Could I do any better? I could give it my best shot, but ultimately what you're doing as a studio is you're trying to predict human behavior. At what point in the release calendar are we most likely to succeed? And that's not easy. Not that I don't think that a movie succeeds or fails purely because of where it's released, but I think to try to guess when the most people would go to see it and what the other movies are. How was that movie received? Was that a bad movie? Are more people going to go see this one because they didn't go see that one? Those are all X factors that you can't account for. So I respect the fact that it's a very difficult thing to do, but there are some like the Bone Temple coming out in January. There are some decisions that I'm like, what are you doing? What are you thinking there? Sakaki Chrono says, hi, Dan. I was wondering if there are any movies you think would have been better as TV shows or vice versa. Are there any movie re-releases you want? Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this before, but I think Eternals would have actually been a very good limited series. I think that would have been a very strong show for Disney Plus instead of a movie, because you could have made it more compartmentalized. You could have told the story longer. You could have gone even deeper into the characters. I don't think it worked very well as a movie. I think it could have worked very well as a TV show. A TV show that I think would have been a better movie. I'm sure there's some Marvel stuff that they've done that could have been a better movie. I mean, the Falcon and Winter Soldier, I think probably would have been a better movie than a TV show. Yeah, there's definitely some. Even The Acolyte, I think maybe would have been a better movie than a TV show. If you condensed the stuff in that show down to the best parts of it, I think it had potential. Jake Clark 2033 said, rating for Fallout Season 2, and was it better than Season 1? Well, Jake, unfortunately, as I just said, I have not yet watched Fallout Season 2, so TBD. We'll see when I can catch up with it. Potter Potty Allen, thank you, says, any thoughts on the Beatles films, casting, and the whole full 4 films in one day event planned? Going to be a long day for me. I like the talent that's attached to it. I've seen the pictures that have come out. I think that, it all comes down to execution. It's not just what a photo can say. 4 movies in one day, I don't know. That's something that I think has like a 20% chance of working and an 80% chance of just being a guarantee that none of them make a whole lot of money. We'll see if they stick to that. But I would almost do, like, if you're going to do it like one a week, maybe like in 4 consecutive weeks, but like 4 in one day, I don't know about that. But I like the actors that they cast in those roles. I think it's I'm intrigued, but skeptical about the release. Film Chart 42 said, should the Bucky film be animated or live action? I think it should be a hybrid. I think it should be Bucky's animated, but everyone else is live action. And I think it should be set in a Bucky's, obviously, at least to start, because Bucky's is a wonderland all of its own. Bucky's is like another world. Simon Huffnagel 6714 says, "Hey Dan, I just wanted to say hi again. I'm Simon and I met you at Sundance. You were leaving Tuner and I was heading to Carousel. I remember that. Yeah, what's up, man? So glad I had the chance to meet you. Glad you enjoyed the festival. You caught me. That was my first Sundance movie. I was heading out of my first movie ever at Sundance. I believe that was at Eccles, if I'm not mistaken, because I think that was the only movie I saw at the Eccles Center. So yes, Simon, thank you for being one of the people that came up and said hello. It was so great to meet so many people out in Park City, and like I said, for me, it was very humbling to know how many people were there. I wanted to say hi. Pharaoh Hero says, why is Zootopia so popular in China? Is there any other Hollywood movie that made more money in one foreign country than in the US, like Zootopia 2 in China? I think there have been a few, like Warcraft, I think made way more money in China than it did in the US. I believe that there are one or two Fast and Furious movies that made more in China than the US. It's happened. It's definitely happened before. Why is Zootopia so popular in China? I don't know exactly, but it's very popular there. I'm sure that there are people that have done deeper dives on it than I have. But I don't know exactly the root behind why Zootopia is so popular there. Richie Mars says, hi, Dan. I worked as a set dresser on Take Me Home. It meant a lot to hear you talking about it. Thank you. Take Me Home was one of the most memorable festivals that I saw, or memorable movies that I saw at the festival. It was such an interesting way to approach that movie. I'll talk about it when I do my wrap up, but that's great. I've heard from some people that worked on Sundance movies. The editor of The Gallerist, which was a Natalie Portman and Jenna Ortega movie, came up and said hello. He's like, "Oh, I have a movie here," and I was like, "Oh, which one?" He's like, "Oh, I was the editor on The Gallerist." I'm like, "Oh, one of the hottest tickets of the festival." Okay, well, nice to meet you. Thank you for watching. Dylan Fitzsimons says, or Fitzsimon says, "Where does One Battle After Another rank for you among Paul Thomas Anderson's films?" I owe a lot of them a rewatch. I have not seen Boogie Nights in a very long time. I have not seen Punch Drunk Love in a very long time. I haven't rewatched Magnolia in a very long time. So I think it'd be hard for me to kind of contextualize it. Maybe that'd be a good idea for the channel as we get closer to the Oscars. Maybe do a ranked for Paul Thomas Anderson and give me an excuse to rewatch those movies. But I would say, just based off my cold reading, definitely in the upper half, but so many of them are good movies. I think I'd have to rewatch all of them to refresh myself on the finer points before I could definitively say, One Battle After Another, for example, is in my top 3 or in my top 5. It would be below There Will Be Blood, though, because I can tell you right now, that one I have rewatched recently. I rewatch it every year or two, and it's one of my favorite movies ever. Dominique Insouza says, do you have an address for fan mail, P.O. Box or something? No, I don't. I used to have a P.O. Box, and I just decided not to use it anymore. And I don't really do fan mail, an address for fan mail, but you're here on the channel. I mean, comments and everything. I read all the comments that people leave. It's easy to get to me. It's easy to get a message to me because I try to open myself up to as much feedback from people as possible. Ghostnom X4R says, good morning from Tokyo, Japan. Have you seen Kokuho, which is nominated for this year's Oscars for best makeup and hairstyling? It's a great movie. I have not, but I've heard that it's really good. I need to start I think they call it on, I don't know if it's on Letterboxd or elsewhere. They call it the Oscars Death Race, which is the attempt to see every movie that's nominated for an Oscar, and that is on my list. So I do plan to see it before the Academy Awards ceremony. CDub2393, and hello back to you in Japan. CDub2393 became a member. Thank you so much, CDub. Dominique says, have you ever thought about visiting movie festivals in different countries, like Brazil, for example, asking for a friend? Well, Cannes, if I was going to, I would say Cannes would be my first one, the Cannes Film Festival in France. That's a long ways off, if ever. Berlin, Venice, Toronto. Toronto would probably be before Cannes, honestly. That's in Canada. That counts as a separate country. So the Toronto Film Festival, Cannes, Berlin, Venice. But listen, if I had the means, if money was no object, I would probably spend half the year jetting around to as many film festivals as I could, because I just loved that atmosphere so much and the chance to see movies. But it all comes down to time and money. So I would say that Toronto would probably be the next one up for me if I were going to go out of the country, and then Cannes would be after that. Cartoon 49 says, thoughts on Train Dreams? If you've seen it yet, yeah, it was in my top 10 of the year. I think it was pretty high up in my top 10 favorite movies of 2025. I really liked that movie. Beautiful film. I was happy that it got recognized to a degree at the Oscars. MJ Hader, 1985, says thoughts on the evolution of Emma Stone as an actress. I think she's one of the best working today, and one of the few that can do prestige films. And I was talking to a friend of mine, actually, Trevor, and we were discussing Timothy Chalamet and the fact that he has such cachet among especially younger moviegoers, and is one of the few people who we both think can bring people to movies they wouldn't otherwise see just because it's a Timothy Chalamet movie because he's in it. And he said there's an actress who I think is similar, and I'm curious if you have one too. And we both said Emma Stone. I think that Emma Stone is one of the few actors that can bring people to a movie that they wouldn't otherwise see, and those movies are challenging films. Not like make $100 million, but I do think that more people saw Bugonia, for example, or Poor Things because Emma Stone was in it. So it's been really interesting to watch her evolution from teen movies and roles like that to, I think, one of the best actors working today. And I think that she does have the ability to get people interested in the movies that she's in. Necaroni says, hi, Dan. I was the first person featured on your old hotline a couple years ago. Just wanted to let you know I'm still watching and a fan. Thank you so much. I loved I'm not even going to say it. There was a company that said that they were going to sponsor me for an entire year. And I built a whole segment of my show around it called The Hotline that was named after this company. And it was a great segment of the show. And then like 2 months in, they were like, never mind, which I didn't know that's how deals worked. But apparently they do work that way. Thank you so much for continuing to watch. Zeusiville says, hey, Dan, I'm just popping in for a minute to ask for a rant about how most theaters don't mask their screen to the movie's aspect ratio. It's my number one litmus test for an average theater versus a great theater. I mean, I think I've done the aspect ratio rant before. Let me warm up my voice here. I think I talked about this in my Screen Junkies days. If you don't know what Zeusiville is referring to here, if you go to a movie theater, there are generally curtains on the side and a lot of them up at the top that are motorized. Movies are shot in different aspect ratios, which means the frame size is different. And what movie theaters used to do is, depending on what movie was showing in that theater, they would adjust the curtains on the side and they would adjust the curtains on the top so that the screen matched the size of the aspect ratio of the movie. So there was no blank screen. The movie filled up the entire screen. And as theaters began cutting staff and as they started hiring fewer people and relying less on expertise, they stopped doing that because it was more complicated. And so there are a lot of movies now, especially if you go to a big chain like an AMC or Cinemark or Regal, where the masks are fully open. And so if you're watching a movie that's in a narrower aspect ratio than the screen, you just see the blank screen at the top and the bottom, or sometimes on the sides. I hate that. I think it's lazy. I'm not shocked that big theaters don't do it anymore because they change those movies in and out of theaters so often, and it would just add an extra step that they don't want to take because they don't want to pay somebody to have to do it. And I hate that because I think it is part of the experience. I actually noticed that at Sundance. Every single theater, every single movie that I went to, they masked the screen so that it was masked off for the proper aspect ratio. It was one of the first things that started going away. I mean, it probably goes back about 10 years at this point where I started ranting about that on Screen Junkies, probably SJU. And a lot of people are like, what's the big deal? I don't understand. Like, what's the big deal? It's like, because that is an indication of where we're going, which is that these theaters don't care about the movie going experience. And that has certainly been the experience over the last decade or so. That's just one example of it. Damian Barriga says, do you watch Siskel, Ebert, Roper reruns on YouTube? I do sometimes watch Siskel and Ebert reruns. I don't as much watch Ebert and Roper. Not that I didn't like Roper. Roper was all right, but he was no Gene Siskel. I will sometimes still watch Siskel and Ebert, old episodes of Siskel and Ebert. Dominique in Sousa says, do you have any pets? I do not have any pets anymore. I thought about getting pets, but number one, I'm gone. I'm on the road so much. I mean, obviously with Sundance and stuff like that, but even just regularly, I'll drive out of town to go to screenings a lot. I'll go, for a day, or I'll have to stay overnight. And, for a dog, for example, I don't want to just leave a dog outside all the time, or definitely not inside all the time, or have to hire a pet sitter or have to kind of impose on friends to go check on the dog. Cats are a little easier, but if I have a pet, I want to be there and available as a companion for that pet. I've never viewed pets as a convenience for me only. Like, I think that you should give your pet as good a life as they give you, or try to. So I want to make sure that if I have a pet, that I am here for them, and for an amount of time that's fair to them. So I don't currently have any pets, but I'm sure I will at some point in the future. Annihilism says, what do you think of the Odyssey and Dune 3 will stack up in next year's award season, if at all? Big fan from Albania. Well, I mean, my hope would be that they're both good enough that they are in contention together. I'd love to see another great Villeneuve movie. I'd love to see another great Nolan movie. I just think it's too early to tell. I mean, there have been movies that seem like dead locks for Oscars, and then they come out and people are like, oh, it wasn't that good. So hopefully both major contenders. That would be great. Dominique again says, will you review the new Silent Hill movie? Have you any of the others or played the games? I've not played the games. I don't have any plans to review the new one. I haven't seen any of the old ones. It's just not really something I ever got into. But I've heard the games are good. So I just don't have a whole lot of time to do gaming. And I've never really been a huge gamer. Damian Barriga says, might you do an Iron Lung / Send Help double review? Love Send Help. Rachel McAdams is my favorite actress. She's not praised enough for her huge comedy skills. I do want to see Send Help. I thought about doing a double review, but for some reason, my double reviews never really seem to do well. I don't know if it's because I'm just excluding one audience, because people are like, oh, I don't really care about that movie, so I'm not going to watch it. So Iron Lung is up first because I've seen it. So that'll be up tomorrow. Maybe I'll go see Send Help today or tonight or tomorrow, maybe. Well, no, not tomorrow, because I'm heading back out of town for a day tomorrow. But maybe I could do Send Help, like split it up, like Iron Lung in the morning or Send Help in the afternoon. I don't know, but I definitely want to see Send Help because I've heard good things about it. Clay7729 says, what was the biggest audience reaction you've ever experienced in a theater? I mean, I remember when I went to see, I'm dating myself, when I went to see Rush Hour in a theater, when it ended, the audience like just exploded into applause. It's one of the only movies I remember an audience just like, they loved that movie. Rush Hour in theaters in 1998 was a pretty big deal. I do remember going to see Spider-Man No Way Home, knowing what was in the movie. I've been able to see it at a critic screening already. I went to see it opening weekend with a crowd, and I knew what was coming. And that was some of the most fun I've ever had in a movie theater, and one of the loudest theater experiences I've ever seen or ever been a part of. And it was so fun to see so many people in the theater. And keep in mind, with Spider-Man No Way Home, this was shortly after COVID. So one of the first times I was ever even in a packed movie theater since COVID. And it was so much fun to hear that reaction and to see how much joy people were getting. I mean, screams and applause, and so into the movie. And that was just for me, it was great. Number one, to see an audience having that much fun, to be in a position where I knew where the moments were and I could kind of sneak over my shoulder and pay attention. But also to be reminded that, like, hey, yeah, this thing that people love, there are still some movies that can get people this invested. All right, we just got a couple more left. This one is from Harvsk 4181, says, hey, Dan, took me a few weeks, but I enjoyed your DVD collection video. Thank you. You definitely can use a few more silent films in there. Chaplin, Keaton, Metropolis. Also highly recommend Murnau's Sunrise. Yeah, I've seen a lot of silent films. I don't own a lot of silent films, and I would agree that is a blind spot in my collection. Thank you for sticking through that whole video, my longest video ever. And this is the last one. It comes from Doug Developer 8850, who says, which pro sports teams do Arkansas people root for? I think this takes us back almost to the beginning. We had one more come in here. So it's kind of region dependent. I think that in Central and South Arkansas, if anything, you see people root for the Dallas Cowboys because that's the closest NFL franchise. In Northwest Arkansas, and maybe even heading into Northeastern Arkansas, and maybe this is sort of the Mahomes factor, but I do see a lot of Kansas City Chiefs, because Kansas City is actually closer here than Dallas is to where I live. I would say pro hockey is not really a thing here. Nobody really cares. Pro basketball, I don't really see a whole lot of people sporting one team or another. And then baseball, more than anything, I'd say people are mainly St. Louis Cardinals fans. I'm a big Cardinals fan myself. And again, I think that's all about proximity. But college sports here in Arkansas is really much more of a focus than professional sports. Okay, this is the last one. Firo Hero says, "Hi, Dan. Could you make a video listing the most shocking box office performance ever?" Well, that kind of goes back to the book question. I think that would be, oh, there's another one that came in. Thank you, everybody that sent in questions, but I do have to run. So we do have one more question coming in, but please, I'm going to have to cut off the questions for today. Not that I'm not generous or not that I'm not grateful for your generosity, but otherwise, the show, I think, would keep going past the 2-hour point, which I don't think is in anyone's best interest. Plus, my voice is a little shot and I'm almost out of water. So thank you to everyone sending in questions. If you have a question, please, I promise it will not be another 2 months before I do a live show. So just tuck it away, send it in next time, because I've got this one and one other one. And then we're going to have to call it for the day. Could I make a video listing the most shocking box office performance ever? I think that kind of goes back to a research question for when somebody said, if I could write a book, what would I write the book about? It's hard for me to sit here off the top of my head and say like, oh, this one. I mean, Titanic, I think maybe many people were considering, not hoping for, well, I guess some people were hoping for, many people were expecting Titanic to be a flop because the production was so troubled. And because it's about a sinking ship and hubris and the most expensive movie ever made, et cetera, they're like, oh, well, this has got flop written all over it. I think that a lot of people were expecting it to be a hit, but I don't think anybody considered that this is going to be the biggest cultural phenomenon and the biggest movie of all time. I think that was shocking to a lot of people. That to me was the one that just like people were like, oh, wow, that is unexpected. And there are many movies, I'm sure, if I thought about it, that didn't do well, that were shocking. But Titanic was such a seismic event, especially if you're an old like me who was around for it. I don't think anybody really expected that to be as big as it was. This is the last question. It comes from Jay Barrett Mash 3618, who says, as a fellow physical media collector who loves deals, what are some of the websites or stores you go to for those kinds of deals? I'm not as avid of a purchaser as I used to be. So I'm very basic. I wait for Criterion 50% off sales, or I wait for when Barnes and Noble does their 50% off Criterion sale, because it's the same deal, just different timing. Otherwise, it's kind of the same thing. I'll browse Amazon from time to time and see, oh, they've got a deal on this. But I'm not an avowed bargain hunter in the way that I used to be, where I would check all the sites, Best Buy. I'm sure there are some great sites out there, but I can't give you as much insight. I would say really just Criterion is where I purchased a lot of my physical media from, and that's just keeping an eye on when is the flash sale. That is the show for today. Thank you so much to everybody who sent in questions. As always, it seems like I'm really bowled over by the number of people who sent questions in. Probably just some pent-up demand from 2 months without a show. Be sure to stay tuned right here. I am going to try to get back to doing these weekly. Thank you to people who sent in super chats and all of that stuff, or just wanted to hear me rant and rave about the news stuff. I'm going to try to get back into a regular cadence. Thank you for watching. Thank you to everybody who said hi at Sundance and asked great questions today. Please be sure to stay safe. Be careful out there. If you like the channel, be sure to subscribe, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, recommend the show to your friends. And thanks for spending a couple hours with me here on this Wednesday afternoon/evening. Until next time, stay safe. I'll see you then. Bye.